Hi guys, it's Tammy with Cheers to Creativity, and I'm combining two projects that I've done into one, and hopefully you will enjoy it. If you have any questions, be sure to reach out to me at cheerstocreativity@gmail.com or comment on this video or catch us over on our Facebook page, Cheers to Creativity. Here we go, putting you down, starting this. And here we go. So I'm painting in a multimedia pad, and I just have a piece of plastic that I stick underneath my page just so the pages below it don't get so messy. I'm starting with Colonial Blue and White, and that's going to be my background color. Let me get these paints out here. When you're doing a blended background, you just want to make sure you have a lot of moisture in your paint and or brush. So I'm picking up a little of the Colonial Blue with my white, more white than Colonial Blue, a lot more white. And I'm just going across my sky. I sometimes will tape off my border on my multimedia page just with either painter's tape or even magic tape, Scotch magic tape. I'm going to make my first ground area about there. Lot more gray than I wanted. So Colonial Blue is a medium grayish blue. And if you don't happen to have it, you can easily mix it with a clean blue, like a primary blue, and a little white and a little black. I created a gray first, and then I added just a touch of the bright blue to it, and it worked really well. I'm just grabbing a little more paint. Okay, so I'm not going to clean out my brush. I've got these colors on here. I might even lighten up my sky a little more just in the center. And if my paint starts to drag, I can just dip my brush into water to help it flow a little better. Again, I'm not cleaning my brush. I'm going to pick up a little of that Colonial Blue. I'm going to lighten it with just a little bit of white, not as light as my background. But then I'm going to use the chisel edge of the brush, the skinny part. This is, even though this is a filbert, it still has a skinny edge. And I'm going to pull some trees up. One, I'm pulling a little bit of paint away from the background. And the other part, I'm just pulling in these skinny trees. And they can be a little darker or a little lighter. There's no rule. And I think I'm going to do one. I think I'm going to switch down to a slightly smaller brush. So this is, I've gone down to an 8. I'm still in the same puddle of paint. So it's not quite solid blue, but I'm going to come back here and give myself a little more of a trunk to work with. And I might do that a couple times. Let's do one over here. Maybe a little darker. Okay, now back to the brush that I was using to do my background color on. And I'm going back to that backgroundish. I'm picking up just mostly white right now, and I'm just going to kind of like go across these trees to kind of start with an idea of my horizon. Picked up some more white paint. I'm going to lay that down. And now I'm going to go back and forth this way. So I started off up and down, so vertically. Now I'm going back and forth horizontally. Ran out of paint again. Now in one of my paintings, my snow was much brighter than this. It had a little more of a pop of a, cleaner blue. And I can add that if I wanted to. Let's see. Let's just get most of this down. And I want there to be variation because when we're painting snow, it's not just white. You're picking up the colors around it. There's a lot of blue in our snow. And I said mine had a little more of a brightness to it. So I'm going to pick up a little bit of Indian turquoise just to mix it in a little bit. Indian turquoise is much brighter, right? I'm not going to do it all over, but just a little bit up here. And maybe pull a little in here. Just another variant of my colors. Oops. Well, it got a lot darker. It's okay. It's okay. Now, I have to have some foreground trees. And I'm going to need to add another type of tree as well. But before I get into that, I'm going to decide where I'm going to put my animals. And this is my cutouts of my animals. And I have a fox that's going to be further back. And I have this deer. So with that kind of in mind, my paint is still wet, so I don't want to put those down. I'm going to take a little bit of that gray and white. And I'm going to imagine where this tree is going to come from. So this tree is going to be, this is the straight color, and I'm going to pull it from further down into my snow. And if I needed to, I could even darken it with a touch, I mean a tiny touch of black. But I think I'm going to be just okay, because this is going to turn into a birch tree in just a minute. So I'm kind of coming up, and then I kind of like Y off. I want a couple of these trees. I'm going to do one over here too, okay? Cool thing about birch trees is they do not have to be straight. Good for me, because mine are not straight. And pretty sure we're going to need one over here as well. Go about here. Don't worry, we're going to make these look wonderful in just a moment or two. Did just realize I should probably be looking to see what we can see. Cool, cool, cool. We are pretty much in the screen. Back to my fox and my deer. I almost feel like we're going to need to come off of this tree with the skinnier branch to see our friend. So let's take a minute and turn these trees into something that look a little more birch-like. So I've rinsed my brush out. Are we all there? Make sure I'm seeing the top of this. Okay, there we are. So we see all our trees, and they're not perfect by any means. But what I want to do is have some of them end up looking a little more like such. So the way I'm going to do that is by adding a little white and a little black. And I'm going to start with white. So I'm just going to pick up some white paint. And this is just a nice little 8 flat brush. I'm going to pick up straight white paint and I'm going to push it down on both sides of my brush. And I'm going to go up one of the sides of my tree, and every once in a while I'm just going to flick. I can outline them if I want to by using that very skinny chisel edge and going all the way up. I don't need to outline them. I can just add some of these flecks of color, and I want it to come from both directions. So even though these are more background trees, I'm just going to give them a little bit of the little markings. I'll do my markings on this tree. So I'm going to pull up a line. I wouldn't have to line them, but I'm going to go ahead and line this one and pull. Paint is still wet, both directions. I don't need to worry about those far background trees because we want those just to kind of be in the distance. Kind of line with the chisel of my brush this one. Pull a couple little flicks this way and then go the opposite way. Might want to line that side of that one. Okay, now I'm going to rinse my brush out. And I'm going to use just a skinny detail brush. And I'm going to grab some black paint. Actually, before I grab some black paint, I'm going to go back in with that little flat brush. I'm going to pull some black so it's flat on my brush. And I can pull a couple little of these black marks on my trees too. Fewer on the ones behind, really kind of emphasizing more the ones that are in front. And here I have need to really define that one branch is on top of here. So I'll define that with a little black and then flick a little black on this tree. A little wild and free. Don't worry if your paint's still wet, it's okay. If you hit a spot that needs more definition, you can use the black to kind of roughly outline. Oops. Just made this branch just got very, very interesting. Okay, now I'm gonna rinse that out. And I'm now gonna go in with that skinny brush, like I said. If you have a hard time making this paint flow, you can add a little water to it. I think we're gonna be okay. And I'm gonna have just a couple little stronger marks in my birch trees in the front. I'm not gonna do this in the ones in the back. I just wanna make these stand out just a little more. And I can also add a few extra branches if I want. I can do that with the black. So maybe we've got a branch that kind of comes off of this guy, gets skinnier as it goes up. Maybe this one has a branch that goes this way or that way. And no, we can always come back and add more after we get our critters in here. So before I go any further, I'm going to pick up some straight white paint and make sure that these birch trees that I just did are grounded. They have some snow on top of them. And I have to hit this with a blow dryer so I can decide where my animals are going to go. I think we're dry. I hope we're dry. We need to be dry. Okay, so I have a fox and I have a deer, and they're going to be looking up. So I know my deer is going to be further down here, And my fox is going to be like in my, a little more in my foreground. I need to get sure I can see them all. So I think we'll go with this line for, let's scoot him over a little bit. Gotta be careful. If we need to add another branch, we can. We'll see. Okay, so I've got those on there. I'm just going to take a pencil. I just took the pattern and I traced around the pattern on a piece of, well, like a file folder, or you could use cardstock. That way I could get an idea of where they were going to go. When I did both of these paintings originally, I just kind of winged it. So there I've got my deer. My fox is a little smaller, but he's also a little more in my mid-ground. He's not background, he's mid-ground. And don't worry about tracing it around exactly. As we paint, we kind of give ourselves a little mercy too. Okay, so we're going to start with fox. And the way I started with fox was I used buttermilk, light buttermilk, or mix a little bit of brown with your white. Today I'm just going to use the buttermilk, light buttermilk. Sorry, that's light buttermilk. Excuse me. And I'm going to have my fox color ready. And like I said, there are a number of colors you can use. I'm going to use red spice, but you could use burnt sienna, you could use cinnamon, you could use light cinnamon. There's just all sorts of colors to use. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with his tail. And I'm actually going to fill in his tail, starting at the tip, working back with buttermilk. And I'm going to want to make sure I can cover up anything like the tree trunk, like this one, okay? I'm just going to feather it back, okay? I'm going to wipe my brush off. I'm not cleaning it, I'm just wiping it off on a paper towel. And I'm going to grab some of that color I'm using. In this case, I'm using the red spice, and I'm going to start next to his body, and I'm just going to pull it in toward his tail. It's going to blend with that color. Make sure I have a little bit of the color all the way on the bottom. If I go beyond where my pattern was, it's okay. Nobody knows how fluffy this tail is except for the fox himself. I'm going to wipe that off of my brush. And I'm going to outline him very roughly with this red fox color. Now, from his ear, I'm just going to pull some in. I'm going to start pulling this color into the middle of his body from the outside edge, just pulling it, picking some more up and just pulling it in. Pulling a good amount of color in up to about where his tail is. And then I'm going to come up here and leave just a tiny bit inside his ear, but pull from his face down. Now, the light markings on a fox vary from fox to fox. So don't get your panties in a bind. Just get one of these color, get this color down, pull it in toward your center of your fox. Then, without cleaning your brush, just wipe it off on your paper towel, pick up a little bit of the buttermilk color and lay it in your ear. Don't worry if it's not completely blended, and don't worry if it starts to change colors. Then start up by his near where his mouth is going to be. Pull down this light buttermilk. Pull it right to the edge. Notice how my color is kind of changing a little bit? It's okay. Then let it let it kind of blend out. It's going to change the buttermilk color a little bit. We do want to leave that line to help us distinguish where his body ends. And I'm going to wipe my brush again. I'm not worrying about cleaning it. And I'm going to grab some dark chocolate. You could also use burnt umber. I'm going to grab paint that isn't going to come out. Hang on just one sec. Got to get my paint out. So I'm going to grab just a little bit of this chocolate color on mine. And I'm going to, right in line, right next to his tail, I'm going to pull up this brown color. And it's going to be where my leg is going to be. Now, if it really gets too light brown, you can rinse your brush and pull it up to about there. I'm going to give him a little bit of space, and then I'm going to come over and I'm going to pull his second leg up, and it's going to kind of come up and kind of curve with his, we're going to call that tummy fur. And I'm just going to lightly pull that brown all the way up. Right, pull a little bit back in toward his tummy fur. I like to give a little bit of brown, just kind of like in that curve area where it would be the shadow of his chin. And you can even decide, and maybe you'd like a little more brown on the back edge. I've just added a little water to my brush because my paint wasn't flowing very well. And I'm now going to go back into my reddish color, and I'm going to go right next to that leg. Oops, I don't know where that came from. That leg I just did, and I'm going to pull a little stronger color next to his leg into his tail. I go back up on his ear and pull just a little bit of that back into his ear. If you want to, you can add a little bit of shading on around his bum. Remember, if it ever starts to be too designated with a line, just go back with your base coat color, in this case our red spice, and just add a little bit to that. Okay. Any areas you need to define a little bit, do with either the brown or the red. I'm going to pull just a little bit of brown in here. I'm going to rinse that brush out. I'm going to switch to a smaller little liner, or a little round. And you can give him little feet with a little brown plus black. Just going to give him more hoof-like things. But we're going to come back and cover that up with snow, so don't get too worried about that. But with the brown plus black or straight black, I want you to come up to his very tip of his nose. Just add a little bit of a nose for him. And his little smile is going to come right out of his nose. Keep it really skinny on the tip of your brush. Then his eye can either just be like a little parenthesis, or you can actually give him like a little bit of a Hershey kiss eye. So we're going to start with a little bit of paint to my brush would be helpful. Oops. Got this little bit of just a little arch. And then you can decide, he could just be have his eyes closed. But if you want to make a Hershey kiss, light up the center. Gonna get wider on each side. You can decide if he has eyelashes, which would be skinny little lines from the tip up. Doesn't have to have them. Then wipe your brush, and with just the very, very tip of your brush, dip it into white paint and give our guy a little white highlight toward the back of his eye, right about there. Okay? All right. Next up is going to be our deer. Oh, dear. And puppies. Let's go ahead and use some of our dark chocolate. And when we're thinking about our deer, we're going to think of him having a little bit of a lighter belly. But I'm going to start with my dark chocolate. And what I'm going to do is actually I'm going to outline him. Okay? And I'm going to be very sketchy. His feet, too, are going to get buried in snow when we're done. But to start with, let's just kind of get an idea of where he is, or she. I just filled his tail in because it was little, and I could. All right, let's start at the legs and just kind of fill him in a bit. I don't want this to be a solid coverage. I want to be able to blend some of the other colors in. So I'm just gonna like being a little sketchy. Filling them in. I'm just using a round brush. Remember, your deer's legs are pretty skinny. And I'm going to think about that area that I want to be a little lighter. And I'm just not going to put any, oops, I don't know where I picked up the black from. That's okay. I want him to have about that much. And I'm even going to pull in his ears, his face. Maybe I'll just go around, leaving me some area that I can lighten him up. Again, he's very sketchy right now. Got that color in my brush. I'm going to wipe it off on a paper towel. I'm not cleaning it, I'm just wiping it off. I'm going to pick up that light buttermilk color, and I'm going to start putting in his lighter area in his chest. Now, because I'm not cleaning my brush, it's not going to be pure buttermilk color. It's going to start to be more, have a little more brown in it. Okay, and you can decide how far back you want him to go. Definitely want those colors to blend. I'll pick up a little more buttermilk, and I'm going to lay it on the inside of this big ear. that turned much darker than the front, but that's okay. I'm just gonna wipe it off. I think I'll pick up a little more brown, just that same brown, and I'm just gonna really help define his head here. It's just so this is darker, a little darker. And if I need to, I could even pick up a tiny bit of black with my brown, because I just want that to be darker. I want, let's pull a little of that down here. Let's go a little bit under his leg that's behind and pull that little dark brown, little brown-black mixture. Might even pull a little bit into this leg. I've got a little brown and a little black. So this is what I'm doing. I'm picking this color up, and then I'm just touching it on my paper plate before I take it to my deer. So I'm going to go under his belly here and just pull a little bit of color down into this front leg. Actually, it would be this is the leg that's, yep. Shade it a little bit. Just a little shading. A little bit in the back. Wiping my brush off. I'm just going into my straight brown. I'm just going to try to even this out a little bit. Pick up a little bit of that lighter. I'm just gonna kind of, oops, that's way too much, but that's okay. It's wet, so it's fine. I can kind of like highlight a little bit here, so it blends up on him. Working wet on wet, you have a lot more flexibility for blending your colors. He too is going to have brown, black, or black hooves, so you can go ahead and give him little hooves if you want. We're going to be covering most of that up in the snow, but it's going to need a toenail trim. Okay. Let's rinse that brush out for right now. Make sure you've got clean lines up on his head. Don't have any stragglers sticking out. If you need to lighten up that center of the ear at all, now'd be a good time. I'm going to switch to my skinnier little brush. I'm going to go in with black. And I'm going to tip his nose. He's got his nose showing up here. And from his nose, he's going to have a little bit of a mouth line. And eye could be just like your fox, or it can just kind of be more of a closed eye. You can decide if we add lashes to him or not. It's not, you're not going to see a lot of detail, but if you want to give him a couple lashes, that's fine. And then I'm going to go back with just the very tip of my brush, very tip, the very tip, very tip, very tip. And I'm just going to give him a little bit of a highlight in the back of his eye. All right, now we are going to go back with our white. So this is just straight white. And I'm going to come up underneath my fox, and first I'm going to set him in some snow. Make sure he's in some snow. I'm also going to take a little bit of that white and just kind of here and there scuff it into my snow. I'm going to make sure my deer is sitting in snow. And I'm going to give them a little bit of shading. So I'm going to go back into that straight, or mostly straight, Colonial Blue. And I'm going to think that you might have a little shading off this way, because my light source is going to come from here. So maybe there's a little shadow underneath my fox. Maybe there's a bit of a shadow that comes off of each of my feet of my deer. If I've got any trees that are still showing up, like this guy's still showing up, maybe he shadows off a little bit this way too. Take the direction of your tree and just think about the light hitting it and the shadow coming down. Okay. Now, when I did my deer, I also had a foreground tree that came up. And I think I can add it, but it's going to have to be skinnier. So I'm going to clean off a flat brush, and this is probably an 8. I'm going to go into that brown, and I'm going to add just a little bit of black to it to make it a little darker. And my edge of my page is right here, so I'm going to have to be very careful. I'm going to have him come. He's going to start actually below the deer. He's going to come up. This is my tree. I'm going to make it a little darker with a little more, excuse me, a little more black into my brown. A little black into my brown. And it'll just be this tree that veers off. Maybe we've got a couple branches that come this way, and that way, and this way, and that way. Dirty brush, wiping it off of my paper towel. I'm going to pick up a little bit of that buttermilk color again, and I'm just going to add just a couple little marks that could be ideas of bark on this tree. Okay, this is not a birch tree. This is just your normal everyday stick tree. All right, you can use a round or a liner brush with that brown-black combination and even come up and give you some finer lines for extra branches in your trees. Just remember, we're thinking about like little Ys, and they're going to get skinnier as they get further away. All right. Now our fox and our deer are supposed to be looking at their little friend up in the tree. And our little friend is a little cardinal. So I'm going to take a little red paint. You can use any clean red. So I'm using primary red, but you can use any clean-ish red that you have. And I have provided worksheets here and there for cardinals, but I'm going to show you this one this way. So I'm just going to draw him in. He's going to be sitting on this branch, so they're both kind of looking up at this cardinal. And I'm going to do basically an oval, but on the top I'm going to make it flat. Okay. So that's the beginning of my cardinal. That's his body. It's kind of this flattened oval or egg shape. Okay. Now, his head is a circle, but it actually starts inside his body. So there's my circle. It made him a little big. That's okay. I can always make my body a little bigger. There we go. Okay. This is going to be a male cardinal, so he's going to have that comb, and it's got to come at an angle so he can be looking down. So I'm going to just do a straight angle up, bring it back so it's flat against his head. I know I don't want it to look like a dunce cap. We can add more to that. I can just bring that brush to a nice feather and just pull a couple extra little lines, and it'll make it more of a comb. Then my wing is like a pointed oval, but it starts just above his body and extends just below where I ended his body. And sometimes it helps if I pick up just a tiny bit of black, mix it with my red, so it's a deeper red color, and I use that to fill in my wing. It just automatically gives me a little more distinction. Then the tail is going to come and show up under his wing, like such. You can wipe your brush off and add just a little bit of those dark colors into his comb. I'm going to rinse that out. I'm going to take a dot of yellow, and I'm going to mix a dot of yellow into a dot of, well, a dot of yellow and a speck of red will give you orange. So I have a dot of yellow and a speck of red, and I'm going to mix it together to come up with an orangey color. And that's going to be my beak. It's going to point out, but it's also going to come in toward the body a little bit, in toward that face area that we've started off with, just a little bit. We'll finish off the beak in just a second. Wipe off your brush, rinse off your brush. We're going to pick up some black, and we're going to make his mask. So his mask is going to come up and around his beak, and it's going to come up high enough into his crown, then down, and down back toward his front of his body. We want to make that area right behind his beak big enough so we can put an eye. Because his eye actually sits inside that mask. When it comes to splitting your beak, use your skinny little brush, and you just want him to be bigger on the top than he is on the bottom. So when we split the beak, we want it to be bigger on the top than it is on the bottom. Nice skinny line. You can choose if you want to outline it as well. I might want to add a couple little black feather lines in my wing or even in my tail. I'm going to rinse my brush, and I'm going to make a little bit of a gray color. So white and black make gray. And I want this to be medium to medium light gray. Inside my mask, I'm going to draw a circle. This is where my eye's going to go. I'm going to let that dry. If by chance my mask no longer contains that, I need to extend my mask beyond that. Once that gray is dry, I'm going to come back in with a tiny dot of black in the center. I think it's easier to do the gray first and then just come back and add a dot of gray, of black in the center than it is to try to outline that tiny little eye. Wipe your brush, pick up the tiniest amount of white, tiniest amount, and just a tiny, 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 tiny highlight of white in his back of his eye. Optional to wash your brush out, go back into your yellow or go back into that orange you just mixed, or go into red and yellow again to create kind of an orangey color, and you can give him a couple little highlights in his front of his body. I don't think I have any yellow in this at all. Let's try that again. I think my yellow got contaminated. So I'll pick this up here. It's a little orange. Okay. So it comes the time for a little, any place you feel like you might need a little tweak. I think in this particular case, my right in here is a little off. So I think I'm going to pull in a little more of the buttermilk. I think I want it just to come up a little more higher. And I don't want it to be strong, but I can just still, maybe it needs to be a little more highlighted in the front of his. You can even pick up just the tiniest bit of white and highlight a little bit inside the fox's chest, or even down the deer's chest. Do make sure that all of your critters are in snow and that the snow in the very back makes sense. Like here, you just tap that in, stay out of your tree. Here, tap my guys back in. And we should have a fun little forest friend painting. So I'm just going to, if I can just tap a little more here. Make sure this one's tapped in. Add a little slosh of colors down below. Look at your background trees, see if anything else there needs a little tweaking. But I do believe that we have just created, I'm going to lift this up for 1 second, take this out, and there I have a clean page underneath. And there is my painting of my forest friends. Hope you enjoyed that. I know I had fun putting the two patterns, or two ideas together into one. So here it is, our fox, our little deer, and our little cardinal friend up in the tree. Let me know what you think. Till I see you again, be kind, be safe. Cheers. Bye-bye.